deep fakes. I mean, it is free now. I've done it a couple of times. It's free to go out and
It's
download a YouTube and have
crazy.
it create a deep fake of our CEO. I mean, you can easily do it. And you can leave a voicemail, a Teams message for somebody. And so we've got to educate our team members on that.
Welcome to the CNL podcast, where we explore the experiences and insights of IT and security leaders to provide lessons for seasoned professionals and inspiration for those building their careers. I'm your host, Sedric Show Up, Show Out Lusant, and today I'm thrilled to welcome Elliott Franklin, Chief Information Security Officer at Fortitude Re. Thanks for joining us today, Elliott. How are you doing?
Hey, doing great. Glad to be here.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So, can you start off and tell our listeners a little bit about your background and how you got started in the world of security?
Sure, yeah. So it's interesting. Both my parents were school teachers, and so I had plenty of time to stay up at school and in the school libraries and such while they were working and grading papers and all that fun stuff. And so it goes back to just a curiosity around. Back then, it was the Radio Shack. If anybody even knows what that is anymore, Radio Shack
Oh
TRS
yeah.
80, kind of like computers as playing Pong on those, back and forth and programming and on those. And it really just stuck with me. I saved up my allowance and built my first, computer with, no hard drive, even with a 5 1/4 inch floppy disk. And it was always just a fascination around systems and computers and how they work. And so that led to then in high school, again, working for a technology company, very, very small school. And we didn't have really a technology, company there. And so I was sitting in the library one day and ended up hacking into the grade system. Of course, there was no cloud at that point. It was all on-prem, and so the servers were right there in the school district. And so I'm telling my dad, who's a principal, I don't think that this should have been this easy, and I don't think I should have been able to do this. And so that led to me getting a job from the company that was maintaining it, and I worked for them for a number of years. And so kind of from then on, I was like, this is incredible. This was a lot of fun, and it's like, how can I help other folks protect their systems and see how all the systems work together?
I could definitely understand that. So you basically, as your interview was you proving that hey, I've already found something that's not supposed to be here. I think I'm confident enough to come and help out at the shop.
Hey, I
That's
mean, they,
awesome.
yeah, they called the company, and the company was like, "Hey, he did what?" And then they said, "Yeah, let's hire him." And so then I worked for them. I mean, it was awesome. They gave me a truck. I'm like, "Wow!" Again, and a bag phone that tells you how long ago it was, And I'm like, "Wow, I get this phone and a vehicle to drive around. This is incredible."
Yep, that just goes to show, there's opportunities all over the place in this field. And as you were saying that, I was thinking about a similar story for myself. I applied at this one company. I'll leave them nameless. And during it was for a red team penetration testing type position at one single company. It was a little bit different from what I'm used to. Working with different companies every week as a consultant, but going to one shop, and during that job interview, I said, man, let me just look online. Let's see what I could find on them. And maybe I could come to the interview with some vulnerabilities or some 0 days on their infrastructure that they have to further prove my point. So I wouldn't have to go through all the little questions that are just
That's
foundational and
right.
whatnot, that I can just prove that, hey, look, I know what I'm talking about. And I was able to find some stuff in that one too. And believe it, I got the job. So
That's
I
right.
I can definitely understand that, but definitely always gotta, with there's context, you gotta always be cognizant of not doing anything active or malicious or anything like that. Just taking a look,
That's right.
looking through the window. Up, this is open. Hey, you should probably close it.
That's right. That's
But
exactly
that,
right.
but that's awesome. So from there, from there, how did your rest of your career go, and how did you get to from there to Fortitude? Sure, you've been around the block.
Yeah, it's interesting. When I went to college, they didn't have the cybersecurity degrees or information assurance, and so I started out in the programming track, and I was going to get a degree in programming, and it wasn't really for me. I could write scripts, I could, but when it got into actual detailed programming, it just wasn't something that I enjoyed, and so I went ahead
Mm.
and I did get a business degree. And while I was in college, I worked for a small internet service provider in the town I was in. And again, there wasn't the big companies at that point in terms of it was dial-up internet, and so working tech support for them. And then I started teaching classes at the university, kind of in their continuing education division. I guess again taken after my parents that were school teachers on how you can design, I mean, simple web page design, HTML and that kind of stuff. And it really got me thinking, again, how I can help people and be on the computers at the same time. And so that's I continue to do that and work for that company. When I got out of college, I just did regular system administration jobs, help desk type jobs, and that's still to this day. I have a huge respect for folks that are in system administration, network administration, and help desk, and that's where I typically like to promote team members from, because they've got a real curiosity. They want to help folks, and they know all the systems, right? If you're at the help desk, you're going to have a very high level understanding of the entire infrastructure. And I just think that that's
Mhm.
fascinating. And that's really what helped me get into security. I don't have a security degree. Certainly, I've gone, I've since then gotten, all kind of certifications. I kind of set a goal to get maybe one every 5 years, maybe every, a new certification, CISSP, CISM, whatever that be, all the different ones that are coming out. And so but you're right. I mean, typically, I only work at a company maybe, 18 months to 2 years. Only, that's been my history. Only because there's such this demand, and you go in and you build a roadmap and you help a company out, and then another company comes calling, "Hey, we need you to come do that for us."
Mhm.
And the grass is certainly not always greener, and so somebody will want to throw more
Mhm.
stuff at you, more money or whatever, and it's like you end up going there, and it's the worst company you've ever worked for. And so certainly I can share a lot about what I've learned in terms of culture, but just from an actual technology standpoint, just absolutely love coming in and looking across technology landscape, seeing what a company has, and how ultimately we're here to, every company is here to make money, and so it's like, how can we
Mhm.
help them to make more money while doing it in a secure fashion, and all the regulatory compliance you've got to deal with. But I've been in healthcare, higher ed, manufacturing, hospitality. I think I've been in every single industry, because again, security is security. I mean, there's a few
Yep.
regulatory changes that are different, but it doesn't matter where you're at. If you're at a bank, a hospital, if you're selling, hamburgers or whatever, the type of security you need is going to be pretty similar.
Yeah, definitely can resonate with that. It'd be pretty similar, and I've worked in all the same industries as well, and I can tell you each industry they're facing their own challenges in itself, right? Everyone's facing the kind of the same similar problems, but there's different levels of motivation for the people who are on the other side, depending on where you're coming from. But definitely, security
No
not
doubt.
supposed to block the business. Got to figure out how you can enable the business. You don't want to be seen as the person who's constantly putting up roadblocks and hindering revenue from coming in, because that's how you get that bad rep and end up showing the door.
That's right.
But
Yep.
definitely can resonate with that. As far as with the grass greener being on the other side, yeah, companies they'll throw money at you, and then you get in there, and then all of a sudden, like, this is a complete S show. Like this, you couldn't even pay me enough to really manage this. Where you see that you get some companies that you would think, just with the size of the company, the amount of revenue that they would have, more mature business processes and controls in relation to bolstering their security posture, but that's not always the case. But everybody starts somewhere. Everyone's journey, similar to what I tell people when they're breaking in the field. And the same thing with companies, their journey for maturing their security posture is going to be completely different than the next company, because you got a whole different infrastructure that you're securing, different business cases, a lot of different variables, plus your people, depending on their skill
Right.
sets and competency in certain areas, that's also going to be the one of the main driving factors on what actually gets done and prioritized.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it is also, some of it could be on us as security practitioners. Maybe if somebody wasn't there, it's that approach. I've learned over the years that the approach of coming in and just saying, this is the way it's going to be, and then this is the security standard. We're going to go buy all these tools, versus sitting down and actually listening. And I know it's cliche, right? But listening to each of the leaders and the different, across the different verticals of the company, and trying
Mm-hmm.
to truly understand their business processes, and gaining that trust with them, because how can we not have top down support for security, so some people just go with the fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Hey, we're going to get hacked, you need to give me all this money to fix all these problems. They don't really have a
Mm-hmm.
clear vision, they can't really articulate it, and they can't tie it to the business goals and the revenue. And that's certainly taken me a very long time to be able to do as well. And I think once you can do that, you're going to get the board and you're going to get the executive team on your side. Again, you just can't
Mm-hmm.
come in and with this multi-million-dollar roadmap, from day one, because there's a lot of stuff you can do for free or open source, or there's a lot of things that are just
Mm-hmm.
process procedure, and we've got to look at how we can start with that, rather than just wanting to throw all these tons of tools at it. And every company continues to get hacked, and they've got the best EDR and the best all secure gateway and all these, it's how in the world did we get hacked? Because they didn't have the basics. And so I know it's boring, but I love to talk about the basics.
Yeah, no, and it's funny. It's funny you said, as you started that thought there, I was thinking it's like I hear a lot of companies and I talk to a lot of companies that they want the latest and greatest. What tools should they implement? When in reality, we need to focus on the basics. Before you go out and start figuring out what solution you need to buy, you need to figure out where your gaps are, and then how could you address those gaps potentially without the funding, right? See what you can do without the funding at first, and then build from there. Because sometimes I see there's some organizations they'll go out and they'll buy some nice tool. I'll use like Wiz as an example for their cloud security posture. They'll go out and use grab Wiz, and but they don't have a whole governance program that they can build on top of to actually drive the program, and not just have the tool just spitting out tons of findings at it. Okay, but what are you going to do from there? What is your
Right.
process from there? What is your stance on on critical vulnerabilities versus high vulnerabilities? What's your SLAs
Yep.
regarding that? All of those have to be figured out first before you start going pulling tools and putting them inside your environment. But definitely can understand that.
Yeah, I mean, I've used open source. Again, I've come into environments with zero budget and put a Raspberry Pi in and put, OpenBOS vulnerability scanner and all these different
Mhm.
tools on it for free, at least to show the value to then get the budget. So you got to be
Yep.
willing to do that, I think.
Yeah, and then not coming in like how you said, just with this rigid, this steadfast roadmap that you're gonna just try to shove down the organization's throat, versus actually, like you said, taking the time to talk to those stakeholders to see exactly where's there synergy that you can build off of? Where is there challenges that you could help spearhead solving in a secure manner? Those that just I know you said it sounds cliche, but to be honest, that's the one thing that actually will get people to buy in to whatever initiatives that you're bringing to the table, because they see that you're coming from a perspective where you're trying to help versus just trying to shove an agenda onto them.
Yep, that's
So
right.
definitely can understand that. So can you talk to me a little bit about, when you climb the ladder, right? You're at the top of basically the security totem pole. So I know there had to be some challenges that you faced along the way. I know you spent some time in the trenches at the help desk. And I think a lot of people, when I talk to certain people, they kind of want to skip the help desk and go straight into an executive leadership type position. And you kind of hit right on the head of it. It's like when you're in those positions, you're exposed to so many different technologies for the organization at a high level. So you have a better, I would say, a deeper depth of understanding of the business process of the organization from in relation from where you were working. What challenges did you face when you were trying to get up off the help desk and system administration into a leadership level position?
Yeah, no, it's a very valid question. And I like to tell folks, look, it's taken me really, I mean, it took me 20 years to get the title, and not that the title's all, just everything to be focused on, but your exact
Hmm.
point, you can't just come out of college and expect to get into a CISO role. And if you do, I think it's going to be unfortunate, because I think you and the company are both going to fail. And so you need to have those other disciplines in place. So to your point, I mean, so every security role I've had, and I mean, that most of them have been director titles, director of
Hmm.
security, security analyst, security engineer. But even when I was, director of security, I always reported every single company I reported to the CIO. And I know there was all kind of discussions, and you shouldn't report to the CIO, and it's a conflict between security and IT. And again, going back to being cliche, but it really is about those relationships. I've had some
Hmm.
CIOs that are still, my mentors today, and I've had some horrible, horrible CIOs, right, that I've worked for. But and so some of that you can't figure that out when you're doing the interviews. But and even with, say we've all had, at least one, really bad boss, and you can still get some stuff done. Obviously, um, working, with your peers across the different departments. It's taken me a long time to learn that to have these, you say these uncomfortable conversations, the difficult conversations, even if it is your boss, going in and just trying to take the emotion out, and just
Hmm.
getting a whiteboard up there and just writing down, here's the problem, and here's like two or three ways that we need to, I think we should address it. What do you think? It takes the
Hmm.
emotion out. It takes the name calling out, because infrastructure and security never seem to get along at any company I've been at. For the best of reasons, though. I mean, infrastructure wants to just keep the trains running, keep the servers up, keep
Yep.
the infrastructure disrupt, and the security says we're going to come put a firewall in. Oh, and at 2 in the morning, now all your systems went down, and of course it's the firewall's fault, or of course it's whatever's fault. And so I always, try to on day one come in and say, hey, you know what? When that goes down, call us at 2 in the morning. I want to be on that call. I want to help you bring it back up. If I cause a problem, I'm going to raise my hand and say, hey, let's fix it together. It's not your fault if I didn't put in a change request or if we didn't adequately test it. We need to share that responsibility and not just shift things over. And if you go directly to the CISO role, I don't think you're going to have that experience to know how to negotiate, how to build those relationships. I am super
Yeah.
technical still, hands on, and that's good. That's good and bad. And I know at the larger companies probably can't be as hands on, but I think there's a return. I'm saying of a more technical focused CISO only because of all the stuff that's being thrown at us. And so there's so many different parts of the company, whether it be the development side of the house, if you've got DevOps or you've got, now with big data or business intelligence or AI, you have a high level understanding of those. And if you just come straight in with a security focus, I just think you're going to fail.
Yeah. Yeah, and I can definitely understand that. Especially, I've had the displeasure of working together with some leaders that were straight out of college and didn't have a true understanding of technology in general. And it's very unfortunate to say that, that hey, someone could come out of school and have a degree and not really understand the landscape. You can't break a problem down. I'm
Yeah.
not saying, hey, you need to know every last layer on the OSI model, understand how to
No.
break down problems to the specific protocol, but you got to have an understanding of how does the network work, like how do things like principle of least privilege, tapping into
That's
APIs, just
right.
you know you got to have that high level understanding to really bring value to the conversations where you're actually in the meetings with subject matter experts, so you're not just sitting there on the fly on the wall, just whatever they're telling you, you got to go, because you got to be able to push back when you hear something that doesn't quite click right? And you're not gonna have that wherewithal or understanding if you don't have that foundation. But
Well, and it's very difficult and challenging to defend budgets also if you get in a room with your peers and they're wanting to talk about the business and you're security or CIO, and you can't, intelligently defend, why the company needs this or they don't need to spend this money. Then you end up just losing out on your initiatives and you can't move things forward. So, yeah.
yep. And I've been in that room and tapped in as the trusted consultant for an organization to be that third party person to just speak on behalf of the leader. So
Right.
that way,
Yeah,
it's sometimes it's better heated from somebody else than inside the company
absolutely.
sometimes, but you can't rely. You're not
Yep.
always going to have someone else to articulate that message to your board or to your leadership.
That's
So
right.
definitely can understand that. So there's a switch gears here. Can you tell me a little bit more about, what does your current organization do, and what does a typical day to day look like for you in your current role?
Yeah, I mean, so again, being in, we're in financial services or reinsurance. You think we're a 6-year-old startup, and so
Could you? I know we talked about it a little bit off camera before we started, but for our listeners who aren't familiar with the concept of reinsurance, could you go a little bit more into detail on that?
sure, sure. And I didn't know what it is, was either until I started this role. But reinsurance is again, it's you think about your major insurance carriers out there, whether it's property and casualty or life, and other insurance carriers. They want to diversify their risk as well, and so they have policies and books of business and things that they will then sell off a portion of those to reinsurance companies that then help them. So again, we own part of that risk. So again, if you have a mass event. You have mass wildfires, in California, different things. One
Hurricane,
insurance company
wildfire.
couldn't possibly, yeah, absolutely. They couldn't afford to pay all those claims out. They would go bankrupt, and so they share some of that risk, and of course, at the same time, they're sharing some of those premiums. And so
Yeah.
that's what we do as a reinsurance company. And so, from my standpoint, it's but we know compliance does not equal security, and then just
Mhm.
following a good security framework and making sure that in the end user awareness in identity management, it's all the same standard, which is why I love the NIST cybersecurity framework and now the 6 pillars, which I was thrilled to see them add governance in. But I think it makes perfect sense to just kind of follow those 6 pillars. Everyone, even in the boardroom, understands those now, and kind of mapping your capabilities to each one of those. So from a day-to-day standpoint, that's what we're doing. We're looking at what do we have in place today, what are our gaps, looking at the new technologies that are coming out in terms of how can they help us automate more of the basics. So you talk about identity and access management. You talk about patching. You talk about again the basics of making sure that our data and our information stays safe, and obviously trying to fight against all the standard ransomware and other attacks, and focus
Yeah.
on resiliency, which I think a lot of folks forget about.
Yeah. So a lot of different challenges that we're facing. Got so many different things that are getting thrown at you. I think it's night and day compared to 10 years ago for like the guidance that we had. Of course, NIST had some good guidance in 853 and in some of their other special publications. But I think the plethora of resources and frameworks that are out there now, that there's a lot of different a lot of different ways that companies could pick a framework that suffices for their industry and then work from there and get better. Now, when we
Right.
talk about specific challenges that you're facing in the insurance industry, what do you see as the biggest threat to your industry, and how are you combating that? Normally when I ask this question, the guests they hit me with email phishing, business ransomware, and if that's your take too, so be it. But could you provide some color around that?
Yeah. So for me, the biggest threat is continues to be the end user awareness. And again, being but my parents as teachers, I have a passion for education. How can we make it fun? How can we make it memorable? I try to teach. I offer classes. I have for years for parent teacher associations, for churches, for anyone that'll really set up a time and
That's
offer a
awesome.
30, 45 minute class on how to protect yourself and your family on the internet. You just how to set up the basics again for your home, how to protect your how can you lock down your cell phones for your kids and different things to protect them against the predators that are out there. And so for me, I still think it's education, which ultimately leads to what you're referring to with business email compromise, because absolutely those are threats and risks that we have. But we know technology alone can't solve those, and so how can you balance? I mean, everybody has already got enough mandatory training they have to do because of we're so heavily regulated in financial services. How can we also then add on the security awareness training and try to make it? So last year we brought in like a Saturday Night Live writer that did some fun things for us on that, and try to make it. How can you make it memorable? How can you show short videos? I know people talk about gamification. I don't personally care for that, but a lot of folks do. And so how can we make it, we have the phishing, the monthly phishing test, and try to give out gift cards for, drawings for those that report it quickest and those kind of different things. How can we want people to not fall for things at their house as well, at home, with W2 and tax season coming up, and then you've got all the shopping holidays and the big events. And so for me, education, the security awareness is really where, and deep fakes. I mean, it is free now. I've done it a couple of times. It's free to go out and
It's
download a YouTube and
crazy.
create a deep fake of our CEO. I mean, you can easily do it, and you can leave a voicemail, a Teams message for somebody. And so we've got to educate our team members on that.
Yep, yep, definitely. With some of the threats that I primarily do a lot of red teaming, and one thing I've had to come up to speed and educate myself was how could I leverage this on certain social engineering engagements, right? And just to see the face swapping overlay feature of some of these AI generated videos in real time, it's amazing. I can be sitting here talking to you right now, and my face is completely different. My body is moving
Yep,
around. It's capturing all the movements. It This is what crazy. What a time to be alive. Like the things that we used to rely on as potentially a second factor, like hey, do a video call with the person, confirm. You cannot just rely on that anymore. You got to start taking a look at your playbooks and seeing where could you improve and where are there gaps now because of this advancements in technology. But
that's right.
definitely
Spot on. Yep.
can understand that. What is there a technology or tool that you believe is going to shape the future of this industry? I know we're already touching the surface here with AI.
Again, I'm probably going to be a little boring on that one. I, I tend to shy away from any. I mean, obviously, we have to have technology to help us solve these problems, and there are some good ones out there. Again, we're cloud first. We don't have any data centers, so we're 100% cloud based company. So our attack surface looks a little different. Some of the tools we might use are a little different. I just think folks need to take advantage of I'm one to want to use fewer tools again to make sure that
Mm,
we're getting full use out of those, and looking now at the insider risk, and like you said earlier, I think cloud security posture management again. You see all these open EC2 buckets and different things. It seems like, how did that happen? You do to hold your SaaS providers accountable, since you really have no control over it outside of maybe provisioning and deprovisioning of accounts. So any technology around monitoring of that, I know old fashioned was a CASB. I don't know what that's called anymore, if it's still called that, but how can I pull logs in through an API or something from those SaaS providers? So if I
yep.
were to look, pinpoint certain technologies, I think those are the ones that are most critical right now.
Yeah. And I kind of mentioned it earlier in a shameless plug for Wiz. I love the tool. I don't know if you've had the pleasure to check out Wiz yet for any of your cloud solutions, but I swear by it. I think it's the best thing since sliced bread. Some I've used other
Yeah, no,
tools like Palo Altos, Prisma, Qualis's, Cloud, and I don't see anybody touching Wiz, and I see why they have such a great momentum in the market right now. The interface is very user friendly, and it consolidates all the noise that you normally get from a lot of vulnerability scanners down into just the actionable issues. So if you haven't already, I don't know
yeah.
if you have or not, but I definitely check it out.
No, no, we are, yeah, we are definitely a whiz shop, and I don't disagree with you at all. I tend to shy away from mentioning technologies, but I agree. I tend to. It is probably the best security tool I've purchased in my 20 years. Yeah.
Yeah, it's made my life much easier when it comes to governing our teams and making sure that they're doing the things that they're supposed to be doing, and I can catch them retroactively if need be with this tool
Yeah,
rather than doing some ad hoc scanning when you read in all the workloads at the tenant level, then you're able to catch new things as they're being spun up. So I definitely think that's something that'll continue. Tools like that are going to be continually shaping how we approach cloud security posture management because before it was I would say it was non-existent really. Yeah, you were using the CSP tools, built-in native tools, but just the single pane of glass that I've been spoiled with Wiz, I think now is I wouldn't want to go back to just each individual CSP and leveraging just their individual tools when Wiz helps me consolidate all that into one, and then I could go out into the individual CSPs and see what I need to do from there.
that's right. Yeah.
But if you could give yourself, one piece of advice that you knew when you were first starting out, what would that be?
I think the single most important piece of advice would be again what I spoke to earlier about the conflict, and again this is based on your personality. Some people thrive on
Mhm,
conflict and love it. I tend to shy away from conflict, and as a leader, obviously you can't. You have to address it. You
mhm,
have to address it head on, but it's also learning how to do it. So, in other words, one of the reasons that I was leaving jobs every 18 months to 2 years was I didn't want to deal with the conflict. And there was somebody else that was saying, "Hey, come help us." And I'm like, "Well, sure, this helps. It's a win-win situation." When it's really
mhm,
not, because if I would have stayed at those roles and brought up, in a respectful way, that's why there's this whole, point of having a diverse thought is, being able to get in a room and somebody's going to say, "No, this is the way it's going to be," and "No, this is the way it's going to be," and say, okay, there's a reason that you're so passionate about this. Can we write it down on the board here and determine what is it that you're so passionate about doing it this way? And I'll write mine. Maybe at the end of the day we get to the same solution. Maybe we don't.
mhm,
But there's been so many times where, again, it seems some of these no-brainers, or why aren't we doing this and why aren't we doing this? And I'll see
mhm.
things that's happening in the company. When you get into these roles in technology, and you're like, this is not right. Like this should not be happening this way.
Yep.
And you go to the infrastructure team and you say, hey, we need to change this. And they're like, nope, this is the way we've done it for 20 years, and that which is of course the worst answer you can ever hear. And so it's like, well, have you thought about
Why
changing it? And
change
I
it?
think there's just a fear. Yeah, well, there's a fear of some people losing their jobs over it, and I'm like, no, that's a silly fear because you should learn to do it this next way, and then you'll be even more marketable. And
Yep.
so, if I were to go back and tell myself, it would be, hey, from day one, instead of changing jobs every 18 months to 2 years, I mean, sometimes, yes, if it's unavoidable. But other times,
Mhm.
it's like, hey, let's go ahead and confront that conflict, do it in a respectful way, and it's going to help me grow more.
Yeah, I can definitely understand that. And I've had some similar challenges. I find myself really, this is going to be the most I've been at one shop for 5 years in a row, but it was pretty much 2, 3 years. And especially back in, 2014, 2017, 2019, there was lots of opportunity. And there still is, but they were handing out opportunity like
Oh,
hotcakes
yeah,
because people were realizing like, hey, we haven't invested, all, we need someone in this position now. And
that's
like how you
right.
said,
It all
sometimes
makes, yeah,
conflict is one of the things that drives people to other places, and that conflict could be rooted either in just personal biases, people not being compensated to the level of work that's actually being performed, too many job responsibilities are being thrown under one hat. There's a lot of different reasons that we could go on with, but I can definitely understand that. And for myself, the advice that I would give myself is something similar, but also not to be afraid to leave when you know your time is up. Because that was one thing with me,
very,
just staying somewhere too long and costing myself, other opportunities. But definitely could
absolutely.
understand
There's
that.
always a balance. Totally agree. Yep.
Yep. So while we're on that, for advice, what's one piece of advice that you would give someone that's just starting out their journey into cybersecurity?
And I get this question a lot, and a lot of folks also ask, what certifications can I go get? And
Hmm.
I guess I could speak for a long time on this, but maybe I'll mention two things. One is get involved in your local security community. That's how
Hmm.
I've gotten many of my jobs is through the local ISSA chapter, the Information System Security Association. There's ISC squared chapters. There's ISACA
Hmm.
chapters. There's DEF CON, hacking, chapters in
Yep.
certain local communities. But join a local security community. It's just so critical in order to network. And I know that's typically stereotype. That's not us. We want to sit, in our, basement with the lights off. But you've got to get out and
Yeah.
network, and you've got to meet other folks. That would be the first advice. The second advice is, there's all these free CTFs, the capture the flag. There's all these free resources that I didn't even have available to really learn.
Yep.
One of the areas that I think is super critical is understanding, like you mentioned, the OSI model. I don't know that in and out, but I do know that the layers that are important to me and that I wish I knew more about was the networking components. You mentioned this
Hmm.
earlier. Even with the cloud, it may be even more so with the cloud, but VPCs and these different, the way that you can connect
Hmm.
network tunnels and things together, that's critical to security. And you talk about segmentation with PCI and different things. Can you test that segmentation? Do you even know what segmentation is or how it works? And
Yep.
so for me, those fundamentals of networking, and then again going through doing capture the flag where you can understand the different vulnerabilities and see them in action. It's one thing to say this patch is missing, or to say you didn't follow the OWASP 10, or you've got a SQL injection, but to see it actually work in an actual exploit through
Yep.
a capture the flag, I think is invaluable.
Yeah, because it really, for me, it really bridged the gap. Because when I first started off in my career, I went down the networking route because my father, he was a networking engineer. So he wanted me to be on the networking side. I was like, no, I'm good. I'm going to go be a cop. And then eventually,
Yep. Yep.
the time in our country at the time, I was like, I don't want to be a cop anymore. I want to do something else. And it started off on the networking side, and just that core foundation, knowing the fundamentals. Like I went a lot deeper than I probably should have, than most people do, but understanding routing, how to configure routing protocols, exactly how packets get from point A to point B, and the different things that you can do to intercept them and things along those lines. Really built the foundation for when it came time to do certain exploits and penetration testing, that it really painted the whole picture clearly. And like how you said, just having that in itself, it definitely make the light bulb go off much quicker and allow you to, when you get in a conversation with others, for you to be able to articulate the topics in a point that they can resonate with, from use analogies that they can understand.
That's right.
So they definitely can understand that. And as far as like the certifications wise, I get this. I asked this question on purpose because I know there's always going to be a different answer, right? And the point is to drive home to our listeners that are just starting off, is that they have to, one, get the foundations right, the fundamentals down, and then from there you got to decide what's the path that you want to go down. Because what's a
That's
good
right.
certification for one person might not be a good certification for the next person, depending on what your career goals and interests are.
That's right. I mean, when I'm hiring folks, sometimes sure that can be a differentiator if two folks are very similar. But to be
Mhm.
quite honest, I mean, I don't ever look at, I don't look at your degree. I don't look at your certification. I look through what have you done? What have I want to know if you're a critical thinker. I want to know how you approach problem solving.
Mhm.
I want to make sure that you know how to go out and research things, now, especially with ChatGPT and other things, instead of
Mhm.
coming in quickly just asking a question, let's see if you can research it first on your own and solve the problem on your own. Those are the kind of things I want to know, more so than, yes, the certifications, certainly I believe in them. I've got a few of them, but I think they kind of baseline you in certain areas. But don't think that just because you don't have one doesn't mean you can't get into cyber and work in the security field. And it's funny you mentioned that because I was the exact same way out of college or out of high school. I wanted to be a police officer, and I was like, and I was doing volunteer fire department, different things, and then when I got into college, I was like, hey, I think I like this IT thing, this tech thing a little more.
Yep, yep. I figured, I was like, let me go be the cyber cop. I'd rather
That's
do
what I told.
that.
That's what I tell my. That's what we're doing now. That's exactly what we're doing now. Yep.
Oh yeah, it's been an amazing journey for me. I spent a lot of time doing a lot of forensics and penetration testing, and where normally most folks would say, "Well, most of those folks are normally two different sides of the spectrum." But I've been very fortunate to spend some time in each discipline. And as far as like when you were saying, just being able to go out there and research and solve a problem, I think that is one of the most important skills that any professional in this space needs to have because we're always getting new things thrown at us, new technology, and you're not always going to have some manual out there to tell you exactly what to do. So you're going to have the skill of being able to do research, process that information, interpret it, and understand how to apply it in the context under your current organization. You know,
That's right.
would you would agree that that's one of the most important skills professionally to develop in this space, or is there anything else that you have in mind?
No, I agree, and I've hired some folks that have ended up. We all make some good hires and some that are more challenging, and I've hired some folks in the past that didn't have that skill, and so it's very challenging when also for us as leaders to realize everybody communicates differently, and so you'll have someone
Mhm.
come in and they're only going to do exactly the tickets you put in their queue. And I'm going, that would kill me. If I just sat there all day and waited for a ticket to pop in my queue, why am I not going out and proactively saying, oh, I see these three or four that are together. Why can't I go write a script that solves this? Or maybe we need to do something different because we're seeing all this, looking for those patterns. But
Yep.
if you're just sitting there waiting for tickets to come in, that you're not going to work on my team. That's
You're gonna get
don't
let
you want to
go.
be more proactive? Yeah, exactly. And so, that would be that's an area that I just think it's you've got to be curiosity minded. I mean, that's what you're in cybersecurity for. You want to be one up on the bad guys, or you want to try to figure out
Mhm.
what they're looking for and patch the hole first before they find it. And so you've got to be constantly looking for those problems. You've got to be a problem solver. Not that we can't ask questions. We have to ask questions. We have to collaborate. But it's just a
Mhm.
matter of how proactive are you in that?
Yeah, you can't really wait for someone to tell you what you're supposed to do in this industry. And then when I
Right.
hire someone for a certain role, I'm hiring them knowing that they have the critical thinking skills to go out and figure out what needs to be done and then to go and build a roadmap and then execute on it. But when you come into an organization and
Absolutely.
you're sitting back and you're just waiting to be told what to do. Yes, in some positions, yes, that's what you were hired for support, but you're being primarily hired for your critical thinking skills and for your ability to be a self-starter and drive because everyone is dealing with a lot of different crap. Like nobody has the time to
Yep.
sit there and babysit anybody. So you have to be making sure you're being a contributing member of the team and you're bringing value to the table in the area that you were hired for. You don't want to just sit back and just try to do things piecemeal as they come in. Start thinking about how could you approach something systematically, right? So if you see, like you said, you see 4 or 10 tickets all keep coming in the same area. Let me not just worry about those individual instances. Let's start to think about the holistic solution to the problem. Maybe it's some user education that needs to happen. Maybe it's we don't have the right policies or procedures in place defined and our users educated on them in order to tackle this recurring issue. So I can
That's
definitely
right. Yep.
understand you there, and I know not. I've had the unfortunate displeasure of having to let certain individual goes because of some of those qualities. But
Yep.
it's
Yep.
that's that drive and ambition is really something that you can't teach. You really can't. You can
That's
look
right.
for it. You can try to tell people what you're looking for, but at the end of the day, that self-starting, the what gets them going, that's completely on them. Definitely can
Yeah, I mean, I
understand
would even
that.
create checklists, and I would create checklists for them and everything. And this is what you need to do every day when you come in. I tried to help, and the person just, sometimes they just don't want to learn, and it's like, okay, well, like you said, we're going to have to part ways, and that's unfortunate. But you've got to be hungry. You've got to come into these roles hungry.
Yep, and you hit on another head. The learn, hungry to learn. You are only as good as your skills in this industry. If you let your skills get stale, you're pretty much useless if you don't have relevant skills that the organization actually needs to be able to take advantage of. So it's not to say that hey, you're not competent. You're competent in certain areas, just probably not in the areas that are actually useful and applicable to the business at this stage. So you always got to stay hungry. You got to stay continuously educating yourself, and that's why these certifications they have continuing education requirements because they know things are constantly changing. The things that you learned 10, 20 years ago might not be applicable to what you're doing on a day-to-day
That's
basis
right.
today. So definitely can
That's right.
understand that.
Yep.
As we wrap up things here, I did have a couple last questions for you. One on your long-term vision on, what do you hope to achieve in this industry when you're said and done at the end of your career? there anything you have specific that you hope to achieve or change in the industry? I know you made it up to the C level, so you might have already hit your goal. But yeah.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, there's a couple of things. One is, again, I'm super involved in the local security community and in different conferences, and continue wanting to give back any way that I can. It's easy to say we want to be a mentor, but it's actually I find it very challenging just to carve out the time. And so I personally have a mentor that's been very gracious with his time, and he's maybe only a year or two away from retirement. And so, we meet, and now I'm trying to reciprocate that and be a mentor, for one or two different folks. And so, again, I think that's important because we can share those lessons learned. Also, from a career standpoint, I see that the CISO role and the CIO role very similar, and I don't know how that's going to continue to change. But I have a love and real passion for technology overall, and so I could see myself, if the opportunity was right, moving into a maybe a I don't even know if it would still be called that, right, but a CIO type role where you're
Mhm.
leading the strategy and the technology for an entire organization, obviously with that security mindset. Because again, I just think a lot of the stuff I've learned in these 20 years to get to where I'm at applies much broader than just security. It's like we've been talking about life lessons and budgeting and strategy and listening
Mhm.
and capability mapping and all those different things. And so yeah, I hate hearing companies, and you see the complaints on LinkedIn and others where somebody will come in and they'll say, "Man, our IT department's horrible. They don't understand what anything that we do. We're having to go out and buy all these other tools." And so that's where when if technology isn't being adopted at a company, maybe for the wrong reasons or the right reasons, whatever, because the leader is not selling it correctly or educating folks on it correctly or trying to shove things down the business's throat, then that affects security as well. And so it kind of has a domino effect. So that might be a goal that I have as well. But certainly I just love being involved in the community. So even if I retired, would still be going to conferences, maybe speaking at conferences, doing whatever I can to help educate the next generation. Because we need good security folks.
Yeah, there's not enough of us. And I try to tell people, especially because I mentor a few people, and like you said, carving out the time it's very hard because as professionals, you're juggling so much, but then also to mentor someone else, unless that person that's their 9 to 5, like they're dedicated, you're gonna get what they can give of you, what's left over for them. So I can definitely understand that.
That's
Try to
right.
pay it forward when you can, because a mentor is a cheat code. That's what I try to tell anyone is like you leverage that
It
mentor,
is.
you ask your questions tailored to your specific situation, so you're not just getting generic advice that you would get if you Google,
Mhm.
right? So
It's valuable.
definitely can understand that. Now, as far as if our guests wanted to catch up with you and connect with you online somewhere, where could they find you?
Yeah, absolutely. I tend to be pretty active on LinkedIn, so they should be able to connect with me on LinkedIn, no issue, and would be happy to chat.
All right, fair enough. Well, Elliot, I want to thank you again for coming on and sharing your incredible insights and experience with us today. It's been a pleasure. I would definitely love to have you on the show again. For our listeners, you can find Elliot on LinkedIn as Elliot Franklin. And for those who haven't subscribed there or listening for the first time, please, 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 please don't forget to subscribe on whatever form you're hearing this on, whether it be Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube. Please subscribe to help grow the show and for more conversations with IT security leaders like Elliot. Until next time, stay safe, stay secure.